Dear students, today I am here with this compilation of the poems. This idea came to me after I read the suggestion given by Madhumita Senthil, and thank you Madhumita for this wonderful suggestion. I know you all are hunting for the content to revise and learn. So here I am with the compilation of all the poems from the First Light book as per your suggestion. While you're listening to the poem, keep the books with you so that you understand it better. English is all about understanding in order to grab cent percent marks. Okay? So watch the video till the end. Wish you all the best for your forthcoming exams. The first stanza says, "Never shall a young man, thrown into despair by those great honey-colored ramparts at your ear, love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair." So the poet addresses Anne Gregory and reminds her that no young man will ever love her for what actually she is. She'll never be loved for herself alone on her merits. It is also not possible that any young man will not be attracted by her yellow hair. The hair falling on her ears look like the ramparts, that is the walls that surround a castle. The next stanza goes like this. "But I can get a hair dye and set such color there, brown or black or carrot, that young men in despair may love me for myself alone and not my yellow hair." So this stanza indicates that the poet and Anne Gregory are both having a conversation, and Anne Gregory replies to the poet's query in the first stanza and says that she can get a hair dye or color her hair. What will be the color of her hair depends on her. She can dye them brown, black or carrot, that is red color. The choice will be her own. The young man should love her for herself alone and must judge her on her good or bad qualities. The next stanza goes like this. "I heard an old religious man but yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair." So Anne Gregory gets an answer from the poet. And the poet says that the previous night, the old religious man quoted a text to prove his point. The text read that only God can love her for herself alone. Now let me talk about the literary devices used by the poet. Each of the three stanzas of the poem follows the same rhyme scheme, that is AB, CB, DB, as the second, fourth and sixth lines rhyme together. The next literary device used by the poet is alliteration. So we know alliteration is the occurrence of the same sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. So the first example is love you for yourself alone. So the sound of Y is being repeated here. And the next one is and not your yellow hair. So again the sound of Y is being repeated here. Then we have repetition. So here the expression yourself alone has been repeated twice to emphasize the inner self of the beloved. And the expression your yellow hair has also been repeated twice to stress on the physical beauty of Anne Gregory. Then there is the usage of metaphor. If you want to understand what is metaphor in detail, do click the link shown above. So we see the lines that say, "By those great honey-colored ramparts at your ear." Anne Gregory seems to have long, straight, golden-colored hair that would fall on her face and shoulders and would appear to the poet like the tall, strong wall of a fort or castle. Just like a high wall protects a castle, Anne Gregory's hair seemed to be guarding the castle of her beauty, that is her face. Then we have another literary device used by the poet, and that is enjambment. So the first example is thrown into despair by those great honey-colored ramparts at your ear. The first line carries on the idea to the second and the third lines without any punctuation mark at the end. Then we also have the lines that say, "But I can get a hair dye and get such color there." Here, the first line rolls onto the second line. And then there's a third example. "I heard an old religious man but yesternight declare that he had found a text to prove that only God, my dear." So here comma comes only at the end of the fourth line. So the rest of the three lines are continuing. The idea is continuing in all the three lines, and it comes to an end with a comma in the fourth line. So this is also the example of enjambment. Mentonym is a literary device in which a part or one attribute stands for the whole thing. For example, "and not your yellow hair." So here yellow hair stands for the whole physical beauty of Anne Gregory. Then we also have symbol. So when we read these lines, "love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair," here again the yellow hair stands not for golden hair only, but for the physical beauty on the whole. It is a symbol of physical charm. So the first stanza of the poem goes like this. This opening stanza introduces the characters in the poem. Belinda, the owner of a small white house, had 4 pets. Among these pets were a small black kitten, a small mouse of grey color, a small yellow dog, and a real true dragon. Belinda also had a small wagon of red color. The words "realio" and "trulio" have been used for "really" and "truly." They prepare the reader for an element of humor in the poem. In the second stanza, the poet introduces the characters. The poet tells that the little black kitten was named Ink and the tiny mouse was given the name Blink. The little dog of yellow color was Sharp and was therefore called Mustard, which is known for its sharp, pungent taste. So you have those yellow color mustard flowers, right? They have sharp and pungent taste and color. And the dragon, who was a timid, weak creature, was called Custard because of his cowardice. Then we move to the third stanza, where the poet gives a description of the appearance of Custard, the dragon. His looks, like those of any dragon, were fierce, as he had big teeth, which were not only big but also sharp. On the top of his body there were spikes, and he also had scales. The poet uses similes to describe the fierce appearance of the dragon, and his fiery red mouth appeared to be breathing out fire like a furnace, and the nose was big and sharp like a chimney. His nails on the toes were sharp like daggers. The poet has coined the word realio and trulio for really and truly to give a comic effect to the poem. Then the fourth stanza describes certain characteristics of the inmates of the White House. Belinda, the owner of the house, was so brave that her bravery matched that of a large number of bears put together in a barrel in an alternative way. The poet tells that Belinda was as brave as a barrel full of bears. Both the kitten Ink and the mouse Blink were brave enough not to feel afraid of a lion. They could give a chase to lions. The dog Mustard, for his bravery, was comparable to a tiger in anger. But the dragon, Custard, was a weak, timid and comfort-loving creature who always demanded a nice, safe and secure cage. Both the bravery of the cat and the mouse and the cowardice of the dragon are exaggerated for the sake of humor. When we reach to stanza 5, we see that Belinda, who had a bad opinion about the dragon Custard and considered him to be a coward, used to tickle him too much. So much tickling verged on cruelty. The other pets, the cat, the mouse and the dog, used to make fun of him jokingly, calling him Percival, who was the legendary brave knight among the Round Table knights of King Arthur. Belinda and the three pets used to sit in the red wagon that Belinda owned. They used to laugh at Custard the dragon for being so afraid all the time. In stanza 6, Belinda used to laugh so loudly at the cowardice of the dragon Custard that her laughter shook the whole house. Blink the mouse also laughed at him. When Custard demanded a comfortable and safe cage to live in, Ink and Mustard made fun of him by asking him how old he was that he was scared of every little thing, meaning thereby that he behaved like a baby. The poet exaggerates the impact of the loud laughter of Belinda to create humor. In stanza 7, one day all the inmates of the White House heard an evil, frightening sound at which Mustard, the dog, sensing trouble, stared growling. The cat Ink mewed, and Belinda cried out of fear. In fact, all of them were terrified to see a pirate climbing into the house through a window. The stanza shows that the brags of bravery by Belinda, Ink, Blink, and Mustard proved to be hollow when face to face with the pirate. In the 8th stanza, the pirate had a very fierce and frightening appearance. He carried a pistol in each hand and a small shining sword between his teeth. He supported a black beard and was crippled, for one of his legs was wooden. His sinister appearance indicated that he had evil intentions. At that terrifying sight of the pirate, Belinda was so much frightened that she cried for help, but Mustard, instead of coming to her help, ran away, crying with fear. Ink also failed to show any bravery as he fled to hide himself in the basement of the house. Blink too proved to be coward and found a shelter in a hole instead of chasing the pirate. The stanza shows that the cat, the mouse, and the dog, who always boasted of their bravery, were actually timid and weak. This particular stanza is full of poetic devices. It shows that, very contrary to his reputation as a coward, Custard the dragon faced the wicked-looking pirate very bravely. He snorted loudly, producing a loud sound like that of an engine. He struck the floor with his tail, producing a sound like that of iron chains hitting against each other in a prison. Making sharp, loud, ringing sounds, he twisted his body in order to attack the pirate, just as a robin bird pounces upon a worm. Moving on to next stanza. When Custard the dragon charged at the pirate, the latter stared at him and was so stricken with fear that he took out the bottle of drink from his pocket to consume some of it to overcome his fear. He shot 2 bullets at the dragon, but was so nervous and afraid that his bullets missed the aim. The dragon mustered all his courage, killed him, and ate up every part of the pirate's body. In this stanza, Belinda realized that the dragon was the most courageous of her pets and had encountered the pirate, fearlessly saving Belinda and her pets. She hugged him out of love and gratitude. The dog Mustard appreciated his bravery by licking him. Nobody lamented the death of the pirate who had fallen a victim to the fierceness of the dragon. The cat and the mouse were so delighted that they ran around the dragon in circles, who was busy eating the flesh of the pirate. Now we see that the dog, the cat, and the mouse of Belinda, even after their cowardly behavior, kept bragging about their bravery. The dog Mustard said that he would have shown bravery twice that of Custard if he had not been agitated. The cat and the mouse too remarked that they would have shown thrice the bravery of the dragon, but Custard, who had proved himself to be the bravest through his fearless deed, refrained from boasting and modestly remarked that all the others in the group were braver than him. In the 14th stanza, after the incident of the pirate breaking into the house and being killed by the dragon, Belinda still lives in the White House with her pets as she lived earlier. There is the black kitten Ink, the grey mouse Blink, the yellow dog Mustard, and her really truly pet dragon Custard. Belinda still has the red wagon. This stanza is a repetition of the opening stanza and it gives unity to the poem. It also shows that life for Belinda and her pets has returned to normalcy after the pirate incident. The last stanza of the poem. Repeating the fourth stanza, here the poet satirically remarks that Belinda has the bravery equal to that a number of bears, Ink and Blink are considered to be brave enough to be able to give a chase to the lions down the stairs. Mustard's bravery may be compared to that of an angry tiger, and Custard the dragon still longs for the comfort of a nice, safe cage. Here, the satire is obvious as the cat, the mouse, and the dog have cut a sorry figure at the critical hour when their help is needed. But Custard, considered to be timid-hearted like a baby, has displayed exemplary bravery and saved the life of all the inmates by killing the pirate. This stanza shows that Belinda, the cat, the mouse, and the dog are incorrigible braggarts. The dragon, on the other hand, is modest. After the pirate incident, the remark about Belinda and her pets are ironical. Now let's move to the literary devices used in the poem. The rhyme scheme of the poem. The poem consistently follows the same rhyme scheme as it has 4 lines in each stanza. So the rhyme scheme that the poem has followed is AABB, but in the last 2 lines of the 13th stanza, as it has 6 lines in that particular stanza, the rhyme scheme is AABBCC. Then the poet has used alliteration, and there are many examples of alliteration. Alliteration, as you know, is the occurrence of the same sound at the beginning of the adjacent or closely connected words. So the first example is Belinda lived in a little white house. Here the sound of L is being repeated. Then we have Belinda was as brave as a barrel full of bears. The B sound is being repeated here. And then we have the H sound being repeated in and he held in his teeth a cutlass bright. Then we also have with a clatter and a clang. The sound of K and L is being repeated. Then we have the last sentence, that is, he gulped some grog from his pocket flagon. So the sound of G has been repeated in this line. Then we also see that there are many places where the poet has used simile. And simile, as you all know, makes a comparison showing similarity between two things. And there is a use of word like and as. So it is a direct comparison. The first example is, and the little yellow dog was sharp as mustard. So here the poet compares Belinda's dog with mustard because of his sharpness. And mustard seeds also have sharp and pungent taste. So that is why the dog is compared to the mustard. Then the poet says, mouth like a fireplace. So here the mouth of Custard is being compared to the furnace. Then Belinda was as brave as a barrel full of bears. So here we see that that Belinda's bravery is compared to that of a group of bears. We also see simile where the poet says Mustard was as brave as a tiger in a rage. So here the bravery of Mustard, the dog, is compared to the bravery of ferociousness of a tiger in anger. Then we also see the loud snorting of Custard is compared to the sound of an engine. Clashed his tail like irons in a dungeon. The tail of the dragon is compared to the chains in prison. Then the poet says, he went at the pirate like a robin at a worm. The attack of Custard on the pirate is compared to that of the bird robin on a worm. Then the next literary device that the poet has used is metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech that is used to compare two things, but then it is an indirect comparison. For example, chimney for a nose. So here the poet compares the dragon's nose with a chimney because it juts out sharply like a chimney, and no word of comparison like or as has been used here. And the poet also says, and realio trulio, daggers on his toes. Here the poet compares the sharp nails of the toes of the dragon to daggers without using the words like or as. Then the poet has also used repetition. Poets often repeat single words or phrases, lines, sometimes even the whole stanzas at intervals to create a musical effect. The first example of repetition is that the word little has been used around 6 times in stanza 1, 3 times in stanza 2, and 6 times in stanza 13 to emphasize that the White House of Belinda and all its inmates were small in size. It also makes the lines musical and lyrical. The second example is Belinda tickled him, she tickled him unmerciful. So here the repetition of the word tickled shows the repeated action of tickling. Then in the last stanza, as brave as is used twice to mock at the false bravery of Belinda and the mustard. Then we also have the example like suddenly they heard a nasty sound. So the word suddenly has been repeated to emphasize that the sound heard by everyone was sudden and unexpected. Then there is the self-coined words, that is realio trulio. They have been repeated 4 times in the complete poem. First and the fourth stanza appear at the end of the poem once again with change in the tense to show that life still goes on without any change for Belinda and her pets. However, the repetition has been used as an irony, underlying it as it emphasizes the incorrigible nature of Belinda and her pets. Then the poet has also used anaphora, and anaphora is a literary device in which the writer repeats the same beginning of a clause or a sentence, chiefly with the purpose of emphasizing on the repeated elements. So we see that in stanza 1, lines 3 and 4 begin with and in stanza 2, lines 2 and 3 begin with and the little. Then we also have allusion in the poem. Allusion means an indirect reference or suggestion. So it may be regarding a person, place, thing or idea of historical, mythological significance. So we see the line that says, ink, blink and mustard, they rudely called him Percival. So here is a reference of the legendary knight Percival, one of the knights of King Arthur, who was renowned for his strength and fighting prowess. The poet alludes to Percival to mock at the cowardly demand of the dragon for a nice, safe cage. The contrast makes the poem humorous. Then we also see the use of onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is a figure of speech in which words imitate the sound or sounds they describe. So for example, and Blink said weak. So here the poet uses the word weak to describe the sound the mouse makes while giggling. Then we also have the phrase mewich cried ink. So mewich is the sense of mewing of a cat. Then we read the sentence with a clatter and a clank and a jangling squirm. So the words clatter, clank, jangling give the impression of a metallic object hitting the floor or another object. The next literary device that the poet has used is poetic license. We have already done it in many of the poems, and it is a convention that allows a poet to take the liberty with language by changing the spellings or violating grammatical rules, right? So the example of poetic license is Anna Realio Trulio Little Pet Dragon. Here really and truly words have been replaced by the words realio and trulio. So they are coined words by the poet. Then we also see, for there was a pirate climbing in the window. So here the spelling of window has been changed to winda to make it rhyme with Belinda. So these are the two places where poetic license has been used by the poet. Then we also see exaggeration. Exaggeration is when you make something worse or better than it really is. So it's basically used to create humor or to emphasize something. You can also call it overstatement. For example, Belinda giggled till she shook the house. So here, giggling of Belinda is shown to shake the house, which is an overstatement. And then we also see an Ink and Blink chased lions down the stairs. So the bravery of Ink, the cat, and Blink, the mouse, is exaggerated as they are shown to be fiercely chasing lions. Then we also have transferred epithet used by the poet. Transferred epithet is a poetic device in which an adjective is used not with the noun which it normally qualifies, but with some other noun. For example, but Custard cried for a nice safe cage. Here it is not the cage that is to be safe, but the dragon. The adjective safe is transferred from the dragon to the cage here. Then we also see, but Mustard fled with a terrified yelp. So here it is Mustard the dog who is terrified at the sight of the pirate, not the yelp. So the epithet terrified has been transferred from Mustard to yelp. That is why this is known as transferred epithet. This is a very short poem. In about 25 words, Carl Sandburg has beautifully described the process of arrival of the fog into a city and the harbor. He has also compared it to a cat. So the poem goes like this. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. Poem is very short, but it has a deeper and strong meaning. The poet is describing a fog. Now, what is fog? Fog is a thick cloud of tiny water droplets present in the atmosphere. It's generally seen during the winter season. So, here the poet is describing the advancement of fog towards the city and the harbor, and he says that the fog comes like a cat, just slyly and stealthily, without being noticed. So the fog advances towards the city, calmly, silently, on the paws of the cat that doesn't make any noise. One never knows how and when the fog will enter the city. Therefore, the fog is compared to the cat that enters our home in an unpredictable manner. We never get to know until and unless it is in front of us. So next the poet says that the fog sits over the whole of the city just as a cat sits by folding its legs behind itself on haunches and looks at what all is happening in the nearby places and the things that are around it. Similarly, it seems that the fog silently covers the whole of the city and harbor and is sitting over them, looking around like a cat. After a while, the fog leaves the city and moves on. The poet says that this is a natural phenomena, that fog does not stay at a place for long and leaves the place after a few hours. In the same manner, the cat also leaves silently without being noticed by anyone. That was it. Now I'll talk about the literary devices that the poet has used to beautify the poem. First is the metaphor. So you see, the fog is being compared to the cat. Second comes the rhyme scheme. There is no rhyme scheme because you can see there are no words that are rhyming, no rhythm in the poem, but still the poem is very short and is written in free verse. Then we have enjambment, wherein one sentence continues into the other line without any punctuation mark. So we have enjambment here. Last but not the least is personification, where you can see the fog is being personified in the line like the fog comes or it sits. So these are the words which tell us that fog has been personified, and so the poet has used personification to describe the fog to us. Basically is a short symbolic poem. It focuses on the movement of trees that are kept indoors, but they seek to escape for freedom into the forest. The poem has a symbolic meaning. The trees are an extended metaphor for women. Metaphor, when you compare one thing indirectly to other, that's metaphor. An extended metaphor means it is continued in the poem to an extent. So the complete poem has that metaphor wherein the women has been compared to the tree all through the poem. So it will be easy for you to understand the poem if you consider the trees to be the women from the very beginning. Because there are many things when the poet is talking about the trees, we know that the trees cannot move. But symbolically, the poetess actually want to say that the women are moving out of the house. So the trees refer to the women who have been healed and are ready to move out of their houses to fulfill their primary purpose, that is to renew the forest And what forest are we talking about? We are talking about the forest of mankind. The poet says that the trees inside are moving out into the forest that was empty all these days, where no bird could sit, no insect hide, no sun bury its feet in shadow. The forest that was empty all these nights will be full of trees by morning. So before I start explaining the first stanza, I will throw light on the title of the poem, that's The Tree. The title itself is an extended metaphor because both trees and women can renew and reproduce. So they are being compared all through the poem. Second important thing you need to keep in mind is that the poem is written in a free verse. The poem will not show any kind of rhyme or rhythm in it. You'll see the sentences are short, they are long, there are different variations in the writing. So the poem has been written in free verse. The first stanza says that the trees are moving out of the four walls of the house and they want to move out into the forest. This is unrealistic because the trees actually cannot move. So we realize that the poem has a symbolic meaning where we interpret that the tree is referred to female who have healed themselves and are all set to move out of their houses into the forest, again to fulfill the primary purpose of filling the world with mankind. Further, the poetess adds that the forest has been empty for past many days and so there is no place for the birds to sit or the insects to find any shelter. Even the sunlight cannot form any kind of shadow. So the forest of humanity has remained empty for many days, but soon it's going to be full of life because women, that are the trees, are going to come out in the open land. So in this particular stanza, there are a few literary devices used. The first one is the personification, where the sun is given a human quality. So the line that says, sun bury its feet. So a sun cannot bury its feet, basically. The poet has tried to give a persona to sun. Then we have enjambment, wherein one line continues into the second line till the end of the sentence. So here you'll find enjambment. Enjambment means when there's a continuation of a sentence into the next line without the usage of any punctuation mark. So there's only a comma after the first line and a full stop at the end of the last line. Rest all the lines are continued into the other. So this is the perfect example of enjambment. Then we have anaphora. Anaphora means wherein the certain word or phrases are being used at the beginning of a line. So here you see there are two lines wherein the word no is being repeated at the very beginning. So this is anaphora. Then we also have imagery, where the trees inside are moving out into the forest. Second stanza says, all night the roots work to disengage themselves from the cracks in the veranda floor. The leaves strain toward the glass, small twigs stiff with exertion, long cramped boughs shuffling under the roof, like newly discharged patients, half dazed, moving to the clinic doors. The poet explains that the struggle is being done by the plants and they are trying to uproot themselves. The whole night they want to separate themselves from the veranda floor and they are desperate to go outside. The leaves are also trying hard to reach the window of glass. And apart from that, the small stems of the trees, the branches of the trees are also putting in a lot of effort in order to set themselves free. The big branches are also trying a lot to go out from the roof of the room. So they are shuffling with discomfort under the roof. And we can say that the women also are desperate for a change and their effort is compared to that made by a patient who has just been released from the hospital and wants to leave the hospital as soon as possible, although the patient is half conscious under the influence of medication, whatever is given to him, and still he wants to leave the clinic as soon as possible. So in this stanza also we have enjambment, where the lines are being continued, and then we have simile, where the trees are being compared to patients in the line like newly discharged patients. We also have personification where the twigs are stiff with exertion, they are tired with all the efforts being made, and the boughs are shuffling under the roof. So the branches are moving under the roof to just be free from that confinement. Now let's move to the third stanza that says, I sit inside, doors open to the veranda, writing long letters in which I scarcely mention the departure of the forest from the house. The night is fresh, the whole moon shines in a sky still open, the smell of leaves and lichen still reaches like a voice into the rooms. So the poet says that she's sitting in her veranda and she's writing long letters. But when she's writing those letters, she doesn't mention anywhere about the trees that are leaving her house. She says that the night is very clear. She can see the complete moon which is shining brightly outside, and apart from that, the smell of leaves and lichen is like voice which is yelling and expressing a desire for freedom from the confinements of the house. Let's talk about the literary devices. The first literary device used here is alliteration. Alliteration is used in the following words: long letters that has the repetition of L sound, forest from, repetition of F sound, sky still, repetition of S sound, and leaves and lichen have the repetition of L sound again. So we have alliteration here. We also have enjambment, wherein we can see the lines are being continued one after the other without any punctuation mark. And then there is imagery, where the poet has tried to create a scene in which the poet is observing all the things happening in her house. The last stanza goes like this: my head is full of whispers which tomorrow will be silent. Listen, the glass is breaking. The trees are stumbling forward into the night. Winds rush to meet them, and the moon is broken like a mirror. Its pieces flash now in the crown of the tallest oak. So here the poet says that her head is full of the slow sounds that are being made by the trees, and these trees are desperate to move out. These sounds will not be heard the next day, and the poet asks the readers to silently listen to the noise that is being made, because soon a change is about to take place. And the poet also hears the glass window breaking and the trees stumbling out into the night from that broken glass window. And she says that the wind is blowing outside, it meets the trees, and the moon is like a broken mirror. The oak tree is dividing the moon into fragments, and it looks like the moon is broken into pieces, just like a mirror is broken into pieces. So in this particular stanza, we can see two literary devices. One is the simile, where the moon is being compared to the mirror, and the second literary device is enjambment again. The poem Amanda has a conversational style where only one speaker, that is the mother, voices her views. The thoughts of the child, which are put in parentheses, are not uttered. The child seems to be listening in silence, but in reality, her imagination, which is fast at work, transports her from home to sea to the roadside to an old castle, and thus she wishes to escape the perpetual nagging by her mother. So the poem goes like this: don't bite your nails, Amanda. Don't hunch your shoulders, Amanda. Stop that slouching and sit up straight, Amanda. In this stanza, the speaker is probably the mother of a young school-going girl, Amanda. The stanza reveals the relationship between the mother and the daughter. The mother is in the habit of constantly checking and scolding her daughter. She, in an authoritative tone, prohibits Amanda from biting her nails. She further rebukes her for bending her shoulders and for sitting in a slouching posture. The mother instructs the girl to sit straight and in erect posture. The stanza 2, which is in parenthesis, goes like this. There is a languid emerald sea, where the sole inhabitant is me, a mermaid drifting blissfully. So in this stanza we see that Amanda, the young girl, is the speaker, though her thoughts are not expressed openly. She is so much fed up with the constant instructions from her mother that she mentally drifts into the world of her own imagination, the world of absolute liberty. She dreams of a sea with emerald green water and slow, lazy waves. She imagines that she is the only person dwelling in this beautiful world without anybody to restrict her movements. She dreams that she is a mermaid. Mermaid, as you know, is a mythical creature with the head and the body of a woman and the tail of a fish. Her imagination makes her feel that she glides over the sea like a mermaid in a delightful and blissful mental state. In the third stanza again, we see the speaker nagging Amanda. Did you finish your homework, Amanda? Did you tidy your room, Amanda? I thought I told you to clean your shoes, Amanda. From the world of imagination, Amanda is transported back to her real life when her mother sternly asks her if she has finished her homework or if she has cleared and cleaned her room. The mother rebukes Amanda for not having obeyed her when she asks her to clean her shoes. The stanza further emphasizes the authoritative tone of the mother while talking to Amanda and her strict behavior while handling the girl. The girl in the fourth stanza again drifts into her imaginary world. I am an orphan, roaming the street. I pattern soft dust with my hushed bare feet. The silence is golden, the freedom is sweet. Amanda is so much frustrated by the continuous nagging by her mother that she imagines herself to be an orphan who is wandering about in the streets freely with no parent to scold her for walking in the dusty path. The shouting of the mother at Amanda makes the girl crave for a life of silence and liberty. She does not mind being an orphan if that can provide her freedom and peace of mind. The fifth stanza goes like this. Don't eat that chocolate, Amanda. Remember your acne, Amanda. Will you please look at me when I am speaking to you, Amanda? As Amanda's mother handles her daughter sternly, always instructing and rebuking her, this stanza further reveals the behavior of the mother. She prohibits Amanda from eating chocolates because that may aggravate her acne. As Amanda, being annoyed, looks away, her mother commands her to look at her when she is talking to her. Now the frustrated girl again starts dreaming about being Rapunzel. In the sixth stanza, she thinks, I am Rapunzel, I have not a care. Life in a tower is tranquil and rare. I'll certainly never let down my bright hair. Amanda again escapes to the world of imagination away from the real world, where she is subjected to constant scolding by her parents. She has a strange fantasy that she is Rapunzel. Do you remember Rapunzel, the young girl in a German fairy tale who was snatched away from her parents and locked in a tower by an evil witch? Amanda feels that her life as Rapunzel will be full of peace. She thinks that unlike Rapunzel, she will not let her golden magical hair down to enable somebody to enter the tower. Moreover, she doesn't want anyone to interfere in her life by entering the tower with the help of her hair. In the last stanza, we read these lines. Stop that sulking at once, Amanda. You're always so moody, Amanda. Anyone would think that I nagged at you, Amanda. Here we see that Amanda's mother not only rebukes her, but also does not want people to think that she has rebuked her. She, in a commanding and strict tone, tells Amanda to stop sulking at once. She thinks that her daughter Amanda is much too moody. By her sullen face, she will show people that her mother has scolded her. This indicates that the mother does not realize that she has been scolding Amanda and is conscious of what people think about her. Let me introduce the literary devices that the poet has used in this poem. The first literary device is alliteration. Alliteration is the occurrence of the same sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. It creates a musical effect and enhances the pleasure of reading a literary work. So the examples of alliteration are: stop that slouching and sit up straight. Here the S sound has been repeated, which makes the line musical. Then the line, stop that sulking at once, Amanda. Here again we see that the S sound is being repeated. Then we have repetition. Poets often repeat single words or phrases or even lines and sometimes the whole stanzas to create a musical effect. In this poem we see that the name Amanda has been repeated again and again. Then we have anaphora. Anaphora is a poetic device in which a word or group of words is usually repeated at the beginning of sentences or clauses to create a special effect. When we read these lines, don't bite your nails, Amanda, don't hunch your shoulders, Amanda, the sentences begin with the word don't. So this shows the authoritative tone of the mother. Then we have the example of anaphora in these lines. Did you finish your homework, Amanda? Did you tidy your room, Amanda? So here, the repetition of did you emphasizes the harsh treatment of Amanda at the hands of her mother. Then the last literary device that the poet has used is metaphor. Metaphor is a figure of speech that is used to make a comparison between two things that aren't alike but do have something in common. So we see that the poet uses metaphor in stanzas 2, 4 and 6. As he compares Amanda to a mermaid, an orphan and Rapunzel. The ball symbolizes our family of friends whom we love a lot. And the loss of ball symbolizes their death or their moving away from us. So the first 4 lines of the poem go like this. What is the boy now who has lost his ball? What is he to do? I saw it go merrily bouncing down the street and then merrily over. There it's in the water. In these lines, the poet is asking the readers a question. The poet has seen a boy who is playing with the ball and the ball is rolling away from him. The ball goes bouncing down the street and then into the water. Question that the poet asks is that what the boy should do as his ball has slipped from his hand and has gone into the water. This is the meaning of these 4 lines. Now let's see the literary devices that the poet has used here. First is anaphora. Anaphora means a word or a phrase that is being repeated in 2 or 3 lines at the beginning. So here you see the word what and merrily are repeated at the beginning of the lines. So this is the usage of anaphora. The second device that is used here is imagery. Means the poet is able to create a similar snapshot in a reader's mind. It doesn't mean only visual imagery. It can appeal to any of our senses. So look at the line that says merrily bouncing down the street. Here the poet has used imagery. Next literary device that comes here is repetition. In the line what is he to do? So here the word what is being repeated. So this is repetition that is used here. Last device used here is assonance. You remember assonance means repetition of vowel sound. So look at this line. What is the boy now who has lost his ball? So here the sound of O is being repeated. Hence, this is the example of assonance. Now let's move on to the next stanza that says, no use to say, oh, there are other balls. An ultimate shaking grief fixes the boy as he stands rigid, trembling, staring down. All his young days into the harbor where his ball went. I would not intrude on him. A dime, another ball is worthless now. So in these lines, the poet wants to console the boy by telling him that there are other balls around, just like the one he has lost. The shock and the grief that the boy has received at the loss of the ball makes him stiff. The boy starts to shiver all over. He watches the ball go into the deep harbor along with his childhood days. That is, the memories of his childhood. The poet feels it would be wrong to intrude on his solitude. Means the poet doesn't want to interfere with his solitude. It would be useless to give him a dime. Means some money. It would be useless to give the boy some money and suggest him to buy another ball, because the new ball will not bring the sense of belonging to the boy. Now let's look at the literary devices used here. We have repetition of the word ball here. Second, the poet has used metaphor when he says all his young days into the harbor. Here, the young days are compared to the lost ball. Metaphor means comparing two things or ideas without the use of words like or as. You can watch the video on what is metaphor by clicking on the link given below. You'll have several examples of metaphor that will make you understand what metaphor actually is. So you can find the link in the description below. Let's now move on to the next stanza that says, he senses first responsibility in a world of possessions. People will take balls. Balls will be lost always, little boy, and no one buys a ball back. Money is external. In these lines, the poet tells us that the little boy is facing a transformation. He has just realized that the ball was his responsibility and he needs to learn the responsibility of taking care of his things. However, nothing you own will be yours forever. Others will take away all that is yours. No one will buy another ball for you. It will get lost or go away from you on its own. Another thing that the poet says is, money is external. Means it's just a show off. It cannot buy you inner peace. In these lines, ball is a symbol of one's possession. And the poet reaffirms that once lost cannot be replaced easily. Now, let's see the literary devices that are used in these lines. First is the alliteration. Look at the line, and no one buys a ball back. Which sound is being repeated? It's the B sound. So buys a ball back is the example of alliteration. The second device is repetition. The word ball is being repeated here. You see, balls, balls. So this is repetition. Now let's look at the last four lines that go like this. He is learning well behind his desperate eyes the epistemology of loss, how to stand up, knowing what every man must one day know and must know many days, how to stand up. In these lines, epistemology,
actually means knowledge. So epistemology of loss means understanding the nature of loss. So here the poet says that the boy's eyes are filled with sadness, but this grief has taught him a lesson. He is learning about the loss of things. Something that was once considered precious for him has gone away from him. So he is learning to accept the loss and then to move on. He is learning to stand up against the sense of loss. He is trying to learn the real truth of life, the truth that everyone has to learn in his or her life. The truth of standing up against the odd miseries of life that everyone has to bear. So now let's take a look on the literary devices used here. Look at the line. He is learning well behind his desperate eyes. What sound is being repeated here? Vowel sound E. Hence, this is known as assonance. Repetition of vowel sounds. Next comes rhyme scheme. There is no rhyme scheme followed in this poem. The title of the poem is How to Tell Wild Animals. The title itself is simple, long and clear. It arouses the curiosity of the readers regarding what they are going to read about the wild animals in this poem. So now, let me explain the poem to you. The poem is divided into 6 stanzas comprising of 6 lines each. The first stanza goes like this. If ever you should go by chance to jungles in the east, and if there should to you advance a large and tawny beast, if he roars at you as you are dying, you'll know it's the Asian lion. In this stanza, the poet presents a true picture of an Asian lion and shows how it can be identified by the readers. The poet states that one can come across a huge, dull, yellowish brown colored beast in the forest of eastern countries. So if you happen to go to eastern countries, you might get an opportunity to meet an Asian lion. If this wild animal roars loudly and violently frightens a person to death, then that wild animal is certainly an Asian lion. Thus, an Asian lion can be recognized by its enormous body with dull brown skin and by its terrifying roar. Before moving on to the next stanza, I'll tell you about the literary devices used by the poet in this stanza. Beginning with the rhyme scheme. As I told you, the poem is divided into 6 stanzas of 6 lines each. All these stanzas follow the same rhyme scheme, and that is A, B, A, B, C, C. Here, the poet has also used poetic license. Poetic license is a device where the poet can change the spellings or violate grammatical rules with the purpose of rhyme scheme or in order to make it rhythmic or lay emphasis on what he wants to state. So here you see the word dying has been changed to dine so that it rhymes with the word lion, both phonetically and visually. Now let's move on to stanza 2. It says, or if sometime when roaming around, a noble wild beast greets you with black stripes on a yellow ground, just notice if he eats you. This simple rule may help you learn the Bengal tiger to discern. In this stanza, the poet Caroline Wells reveals how one can identify a Bengal tiger because of its peculiar physical features and its behavior. The poet describes it as a noble, majestic animal. It has its distinctive yellow skin with white stripes on it. Moreover, a person can know that it is a Bengal tiger if it tries to eat up the person. So the literary device used in this stanza is alliteration. You see the words roaming round. The sound of R is being repeated here. Then the rhyme scheme I already told you is the same, AB, AB, CC. We also have humor here. Humor is a literary device in which the poet tries to make the writing witty by adding a dose of laughter. Although the complete poem is full of humorous images, in this stanza, if you happen to read this line, just notice if he eats you. Here, the poet gives a comical situation with a person being eaten up by a tiger, and still he is trying to recognize which animal it is. The poet has also used irony in this stanza. Irony basically refers to the difference between the surface meaning of what is said to the underlying meaning. So, when the poet says, "A noble beast greets you," the poet is talking about Bengal tiger, who has been called as noble ironically, because it is basically a ferocious beast that can kill anyone. Here comes the third stanza. If strolling forth a beast you view, whose hide with spots is peppered, as soon as he has leapt on you, you'll know it is the leopard. 'Twill do no good to roar with pain, he'll only leap and leap again. So after the Asian lion and Bengal tiger, this stanza throws light on the appearance and habits of a leopard. The poet comes out with an accurate description of the distinctive body of a leopard, which has dark brown spots on its light colored body. The spots on the body make a peppered pattern. The leopard can be easily identified because of the spotted skin and because of its habit of leaping on the person it encounters. The poet takes liberty with language and alters the spellings of leapt and leap. The usage of leapt and leap makes the sound correspond with the pronunciation of leopard. So we see the poet has used a poetic license here by changing the spelling of leapt and leap into leapt and leap. If the beast leaps on a person again and again, he can be certain that the animal is a leopard. If a person, on being assaulted by the leopard, roars in pain, it is a futile effort because the leopard will not spare the victim and continue to attack him or her. So talking about the literary devices that the poet has used here, I have already explained the poetic license used by the poet. The poet has also used repetition in the line that says, "He'll only leap and leap again," in order to lay emphasis on how a leopard leaps upon its prey. The rhyme scheme, as I've already told you, is AB, AB, CC. Moving on to the fourth stanza that says, "If when you're walking round your yard, you meet a creature there who hugs you very, very hard, be sure it's a bear. If you have any doubts, I guess, he'll give you just one more caress." This stanza describes the behavior of a bear. The poet makes no statement about the appearance of a bear, but lays emphasis on its behavior. A person may come across a bear while strolling in the courtyard. He or she can know at once that it's a bear if it gives him or her a tight, strong and friendly hug. It will fondle and embrace a person till the person is assured of its identity as a bear because of its famous bear hug. The poet humorously uses the word caress for the slap or swat of the bear to use the symbol of love to go with the hug. Both the hug and the caress of the bear are dangerous for the victim. In this stanza, the poet has used repetition in the line that says, "Who hugs you very, very hard?" It emphasizes the tightness of the hug of a bear, which may prove to be fatal. The poet has also used alliteration in the lines that say, "If when you're walking round your yard, you meet a creature there." So you see here the letter Y has been repeated again and again. The poet has also used humor here. The poet uses caress for the fierce slap or swat of a bear on its victim. In literal meaning, a caress is soft and gentle, whereas a bear's stroke is violent and fatal. It can also be stated as an example of irony. Now the fifth stanza that goes like this. Though to distinguish beasts of prey, a novice might nonplus, the crocodile you always may tell from the hyena thus. Hyenas come with merry smiles, but if they weep, they are crocodiles. In this stanza, the poet presents a contrast between the behavior of a hyena and that of a crocodile. Even a novice who's a beginner and has no knowledge about beasts can identify them from their distinct habits. A hyena, while gobbling its prey, seems to be smiling. On the contrary, a crocodile sheds tears profusely. The smiling and the weeping face will make it certain that the animals are a hyena and a crocodile respectively. The poet continues the humorous tone as the hyenas never smile happily, nor are the tears of crocodiles genuine. So let's see the usage of literary devices here. The poet has used poetic license in this line. A novice might nonplus. The poet takes liberty with grammar by using nonplus instead of nonplussed in order to make it rhyme with thus. Here comes the last stanza. The true chameleon is small, a lizard sort of thing. He hasn't any ears at all and not a single wing. If there is nothing on the tree, 'tis the chameleon you see. In these lines, there is a description of a chameleon, a small creature who closely resembles a lizard. Its body has no ears projecting out of it and no wings. The creature has the ability to change its color to match with the color of its surrounding. It can so well camouflage itself that though it is seated on a tree, a person cannot easily trace it. The poet humorously states a paradox that if there is nothing on a tree, there is a chameleon sitting on it. The humor lies in the idea that there is something where there is nothing. So the literary devices used here are rhyme scheme, as I told you earlier. That's AB, AB, CC. Now read this line. If there is nothing on the tree, 'tis the chameleon you see. The poet has used humor here. The humor lies here that there is nothing to be seen on the tree, but there is a chameleon sitting there. This poem comprises of 5 stanzas. Each stanza consists of 4 lines. The rhyme scheme followed in all these stanzas is AB, CB. The poem has 2 distinct settings. First setting is of the zoo, where the tiger is kept in the cage, and the second setting is of the natural wild habitat of the tiger, where it actually belongs. So the first stanza goes like this. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his cage, on the pads of velvet quiet, in his quiet rage. So the poet wants to say that the tiger that is confined in the zoo moves around in the cage under his bright colored skin. He further says that the tiger can take only a few steps because the cage is very small and it is not easy to move in it. One cannot hear the tiger's footsteps because he has very soft feet, just like velvet. The paws are covered with velvet, and that is why when the tiger walks, no sound of tiger's footstep can be heard. The tiger tries to control his anger by quietly walking in the limited area of his cage. He is angry because he is not free. So the literary devices that are used in this particular stanza, the first one I earlier told you, it's a rhyme scheme, that is A, B, C, B. Then is the personification, where the tiger is personified instead of using it. The poet has used he for tiger. Another literary device that I'll be talking about is metaphor. The soft skin under the tiger's paw is compared to velvet. And then there is enjambment. You remember, enjambment means a sentence continuing into the next line without any punctuation mark. So you see the first line, is enjambment because it is being continued in the till the second line where there's a comma at the end. Then you have imagery where the poet is trying to create an image of the tiger, and we can clearly visualize a tiger walking in vivid stripes. Consonants, when you read the sentence like stalks his stripes, so the sound of S is quite evident, and so here in this line there is consonants that has been used by the poet. You'll also see the assonance being used, that's the vowel sound of I is being used in the line, that's in his vivid stripes. Repetition of I sound is there. And then the last line has the oxymoron, means you use adjectives which are opposite in meaning. So in the last line you see quite rage. So both of them are extremely opposite. So here in this line we have oxymoron. Now let's take the look on the second stanza, which goes like, he should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plump deer pass. The poet says that if the tiger was free, he would have hid himself behind the long grass near the water bodies so that he could easily catch a deer in order to have its food. Basically, the poet wants to say that the actual life of a tiger is to live in jungle where he could catch his prey and eat it, but the tiger in the cage cannot do so. So here we talk about the literary devices. One is very evident, that is the enjambment, which is being repeated in the second and third line. No comma or punctuation mark is there in between these lines. Then we have the alliteration, wherein we talk about the plump pass. So the plump deer pass, so the sound of P is being repeated here. So we have alliteration, and then again imagery is being used by the poet as to activities of tiger lurking in shadows. So here the poet has used imagery. The third stanza goes like this: he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. So the poet says that if the tiger would have been free, he would have snarled around the houses located at the outskirts of the forest. He would terrorize the people with its sharp tooth and claws. This would create fear among the people living in the village. Then we have enjambment, where the line continues to the next line without punctuation mark, and it is, he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge. We also have onomatopoeia here, using words which denote sound. Okay, so where do we have the word onomatopoeia? It's in snarling. Then we have assonance, where the sound of O and I is being repeated, the vowel sound. O is being repeated in the words like should around houses, and I sound is being used in bearing his white his. Then we also have consonants, that's the use of consonant sound, S, in his fangs, his claws. Clear? So now let's move to stanza 4, which says, but he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. Here, the poet comes to the reality again from the forest to the zoo, where the tiger is kept inside the cage. He says that the tiger is confined in a strong cell, which is made of strong building material. He further says that as the tiger is behind bars, so his ferociousness is also behind the bars. He just stalks in the cage. He never tries to terrorize the visitors because his power is restricted by the cage. Therefore, he never tries to terrorize the visitors, as he cannot attack them by staying confined in his cage. Here the poet has used personification. The tiger is personified because the poet uses he in place of it here again, and assonance, that's the use of vowel sound E. He locked concrete cell. These are the words where the sound of E is being repeated, the vowel sound of E is being repeated, and then you can see the consonant sound of S being repeated in his strength bars. Alliteration is also used, wherein we can see that the words behind bars begin with the sound B. So let's now proceed to stanza 5, where that says, he hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Then here the poet says, in the night, the tiger hears the sounds of patrolling cars, and these patrolling cars are the vehicles of police which are used to guard at night. So in the night, the tiger hears the sound of these cars, and he then stares at the shining stars with his shining eyes. The poet wants to say that the tiger is sad, and as he is confined in the cage, so he cannot do anything. Therefore, he just sits and keeps staring at the stars in the night and tries to divert his thoughts towards them. We can see enjambment here, where third line is being continued in the fourth line without any punctuation mark, which says, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. And then we have the alliteration being used here, where the H sound is being repeated in the words like he hears. And then we also have assonance, wherein the I sound is being repeated in the words with his brilliant.
Fire and Ice is a short poem consisting of 2 stanzas. These 2 stanzas deal with 2 possibilities of destruction of the world. How the poet has used the 2 elements, fire and the other with ice, both literally and symbolically, is worth appreciating. The title of the poem, Fire and Ice, is short and crisp but meaningful. It contains in itself the whole gist of the poem. Fire and ice are used symbolically for 2 contrary sets of emotions. Robert Frost shows the prevalence of fiery passions like fury, cruelty, violence, and greed, as well as of the cold feelings like hatred, indifference, and insensitivity. Now let me explain you the first stanza. The first stanza goes like this. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. In this stanza, the poet Robert Frost states that there are 2 schools of thought holding contrary opinions about how the world would meet its end. Some people are of the view that it would end because of intense heat, as there is increasing global warming. In other words, the deep heat of fire deep in the earth will lead to natural calamities like volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis, which will one day end the earth. The sun may emit scorching rays and the world may burn down, but there are others who believe that the sun might lose its heat, leaving the world frozen to end. However, from his own experience, the poet subscribes to the opinion of those who think that the world would end in fire. Here, fire and ice have not been used only literally, they also have a symbolic meaning. Fire stands for fierce, fiery, and violent passions, whereas ice, on the other hand, is symbolic of cold feelings. Now let me throw light on the literary devices used by the poet in this stanza. The first one is alliteration. Alliteration is the occurrence of the same sound at the beginning of the adjacent or closely connected words. The example of alliteration is, some say the world will end in fire. So you see here, the sound of S and W are being repeated. Then look at the other line. I hold with those who favor fire. So here the sound of F makes the expression musical. Then let me come to anaphora. Anaphora is a poetic device in which a word or a group of words is used repeatedly at the beginning of sentences or clauses to create a special effect or to emphasize on something. So you see here, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. So here the expression some say has been used successively in 2 lines to emphasize the difference of opinion. Right? Then the poet has used symbolism. Symbolism
is the use of symbols to signify ideas and qualities by giving them symbolic meanings that are different from their literal sense. For example, fire is used as a symbol of anger, lust, greed, and violence. And ice is symbolic of hatred, indifference, apathy, and lack of consideration. Then we also have enjambment here. Enjambment is a poetic device in which an idea does not end with a line. It is carried on to the next line or lines without any punctuation mark, comma, or full stop. So you see here, the first line is continuing into the second, and similarly the third line is continuing into the last line. So this is the example of enjambment. The rhyme scheme of the poem is basically of 9 lines divided into 2 unequal stanzas, and rhyme scheme is not uniform obviously, because in the first stanza there are 4 lines and in the second stanza there are 5 lines. So the rhyme scheme for the first stanza is A B A A. Is that fine? So these were the literary devices used by the poet in the first stanza. Here goes the second stanza. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. So in this stanza, the poet continues his idea that the world would perish, but the force of destruction is completely in contrast to the force in the first stanza. In the first stanza, we saw that the poet was supporting the people who favor fire. He thinks that people have lost all the emotions that were considered to be warm. They have lost affection, love, kindness, consideration, and even sympathy. These emotions have been replaced by the cold emotions of hatred and jealousy. So rampant and so intense is the feeling of hatred that the poet feels that it can be a potential cause of the destruction of the world. The end of the poem suggests that it doesn't matter which is stronger, whether the fire is stronger or ice. Both carry the destructive elements, which may finally annihilate the world. Now, let me throw light on the literary devices that are used by the poet. The first literary device that the poet has used here is enjambment, because you can see the thought of the second line floats to the third line, then to the fourth, and then to the fifth without the usage of any punctuation mark. So here the poet has used enjambment. Then poet has undoubtedly used beautiful rhyme scheme over here. As you can see, there are 5 lines in this stanza, so the rhyme scheme of this stanza is A B A B A. Then we have assonance. Assonance is a close repetition of same vowel sounds within a group of words. Assonance occurs when vowel sounds, not letters, I repeat, not letters, are repeatedly used in a line. For example, but if it had to perish twice. So here the sound of I is repeated, which makes the line soft and musical.
This poem has been written by Robert Frost. It's a 2-stanza poem wherein the poet has used his imaginative powers and conveyed a deep message to the readers. The first 4 lines of the poem go like this. The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree. The poet wants to say that all of a sudden a crow comes from nowhere and sits on a hemlock tree. The hemlock tree is associated with sadness because it is a poisonous tree which bears white flowers. The crow happens to sit on this hemlock tree, and the crow is also associated with evilness and bad omen. Because of the sitting of the crow on the hemlock tree, some movement was made, and that movement caused snow to fall on the poet who was standing under the tree. This is what the 4 lines actually mean. Now I'll talk about the literary devices used in these 4 lines. The first one is rhyme scheme. that's used here in these 4 lines. You'll see the first and the third line, the last words are crow and snow. They rhyme with each other. And the second and the fourth line, the last words are me and tree. They rhyme with each other. So the rhyme scheme of these 4 lines is A, B, A, B. The second literary device used here is enjambment. Enjambment is when one line continues into the other line without making a complete sense. So you'll see here that all the 4 lines are interlinked with each other and there's no comma or full stop in between. So this kind of literary device is known as enjambment. Now look at the third literary device which is used here. It is assonance. Assonance means repetition of vowel sound in the closely connected words. For example, take this line, shook down on me. So you'll see here, shook down on me, there is a repetition of O sound. So the vowel sound O is being repeated. That is why this is an example of assonance. So the literary device used here is assonance. Now let's move to the next stanza, which again consists of just 4 lines, and it says, has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. Right? So rued here is the feeling of regret and feeling remorseful. These lines express that falling of fine dust of snow brings sudden change into the mood of the poet. The poet's mood brightens up all of a sudden. The poet had by now given up all the hopes as his day had not been very good for him. But now, as the snow falls on him from above the hemlock tree, due to the movement of the crow, his mood is transformed. So from feeling remorseful, he now starts feeling cheerful. The poet realizes that the whole day is not yet over. There is still a part of the day left, and that can be redeemed as his depressed spirits are now cheered up. Fine. So here you would see in this poem that the poet was talking about 2 negative elements at the beginning. That is the hemlock tree and the crow. Both being negative happened to transform and convey something positive to the poet. The poet who was feeling very depressed automatically happens to feel happy. Now I'll talk about the literary devices that are used in these 4 lines, right? So the first line you'll see the last word of the 5th line, okay? That is heart, and the 7th line is part. So heart and part are rhyming together. Similarly, the 6th line last word is mood, and 8th line last word is rude, right? So both again are rhyming together. So what is the rhyme scheme of these 4 lines? Yes, they are C, D, C, D. Okay. Now come up to the second literary device that is used over here, and that is again enjambment. As it was in the first stanza, you see here also one line is continuing into the other line. So this is enjambment. Now let's talk about the third literary device used here, and that is alliteration, which is used in the 7th line. If you see the words saved and some, saved some, so the sound of S is being repeated. So this is an example of alliteration. Now comes the last literary device, and it is consonance. What is it? Consonance. Just like assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds, consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds in the closely connected words. The sound may come at the beginning of the word, at the end of the word, in the middle of the word, but there is the repetition of the sound. Okay, so see here in the last line, it says, of a day I had rued. So the word D sound is being repeated. So the D sound is being repeated. D is a consonant sound. So that is why it is known as consonance. Right? Now I'll talk about the message that Robert Frost has given through this poem, and this message is quite positive. Depression and hopelessness do come in our hearts and spirits and moods at times. But we actually need to remember one thing, that every cloud has a silver lining. Earlier, the poet
was feeling very sad. He had given up all the hopes and he had declared that the whole day would go waste. But suddenly, the falling of fine dust of snow brings a sudden change in his mood. The feeling of regret transformed into cheerfulness. He realizes that all is not lost. Now his spirits are no more depressed. The sudden change outside cheers his heart and mood. So you see, the negative things around us cannot impact us if we are positive. Similarly, the poet was affected by two negative things, but he took the positivity of the snow and changed his mood from remorsefulness to cheerfulness. This is how we need to deal in our lives. That's all for today. In case of any doubts or queries, you can drop us a message on Instagram, or you can also drop them in the comment section below. I'll revert to them as soon as possible. See you in the next video. Till then, bye-bye.